if I'm honest with myself about why I do stuff, I don't have good reasons. They just seem like a good idea. Question why is a spiritual black hole. I'm coming to see that that's true.
Here you are, a veteran CEO, saying, every day I wake up and I know less and less. And I fucking love that.
Welcome back to Live Into Your Brilliance, the place where we go on spiritual explorations to find those everyday experiments to solve our real life challenges. Today's episode is for those people who might be going through life feeling like they're missing something or trying to chase down something. Some people might call it their why or their purpose. Well, our guest today, Lorna Davis, answers the question of why we don't actually need to find anything in order to have everything. And this isn't just a lady that talks a big game. She has really lived a big game. She's a global traveler. She's been the CEO and president of ginormous multinationals like Danone, Kraft. She is someone who scaled the mountain, and you will not want to miss what she's got to tell you in terms of what she saw when she got there. If you could whisper into the ears of the world something that you would truly love them to hear, what would it be, and what difference do you think it would make?
Yeah, even as you asked me that question, Alan, I get kind of emotional because I wish that I had known it, and I wish everybody knew it. And I love the way you phrased it. By the way, I seem to cry a lot these days. I'm not really sure why, but it doesn't matter. When I saw that just because a thought occurs in my head does not mean I need to take it seriously. It does not mean it's interesting. And it does not mean that I had anything to do with how it got there. Everything changed. Everything changed. And when I think back to how hard I tried to take control of, work out, manage my thinking, I'm in awe of how good I became at it in many ways. I mean, for all sorts of reasons, I landed up with a pretty kick-ass career. But to see that it is, we have 70,000 thoughts a minute and a day, and most of them are just neither interesting nor original nor even mine, And then every now and then I will have a thought that's new and interesting, and I recognize it by its feeling, and that changes everything. But the other ones, they just pass on by. And when I think about how much suffering I had by taking them seriously in my youth, and when I see my clients now and how elaborate we've all become at kind of navigating this made up, thinking universe, and then how the suffering disappears when we understand the physics of it or the spirit of it, however you want to describe it. It's miraculous, truly miraculous. And I really, really wish that every human being on the planet knew it.
So, Lorna, I'm curious, when did you see this for the first time, or was it a sort of slow, gradual dawning?
Yeah, I love this question, Mark, because, of course, even answering that question is a sort of a mind, it's some kind of story I made up. But I do remember I had been, searching. I had spent a lot of my life, like everybody, like most people, figuring out that the sort of secret of happiness was either outside, getting it all right, enough money, enough power, enough men, enough thinness, enough clothes, enough shoes, enough hair, enough countries, whatever, or inside, backwards, going back down into the rabbit hole of how I got to be who I am and why those thoughts occurred in my childhood and where did I get broken and where all that. I had spent my life in these two in these two universes, because that's kind of the world that is sold to us, or that we habitually live in. And I was old enough at this point. I was like in my mid 50s, I guess, early 50s. And I had done a really good job of navigating that actual made up world. I'd just been appointed CEO of the North American Danone business, which is a $6 billion business. I was fit, I was healthy. I had just recently got divorced for the second time, but that was okay. I was moving back to the US, which was now going to be my 12th international move. And so I was like on this, this corporate game, where they told me to go, and I went. And I knew that this outside game wasn't going to help me. I'd already lost the weight enough times. I had already, changed my hair color, I'd done it all. And I had already spent enough time in therapy, being fascinated, but bored by the whole story of how I got to be, because it didn't help. It didn't make any difference. And I was in a hotel room on the Upper East Side, because I was living in Paris, and I was coming here to look for an apartment. And somebody had sent me a podcast by Michael Neal, and I randomly pressed on it. And I can remember I was in the bathroom, I was doing my makeup, and he said, if you feel bad, all it means is that you're on a train of thought that's not taking you anywhere interesting. And that's not a problem. Just get off the train, because another thought will be along in a minute. And there was something about that sentence that just struck me as absolutely true. And it took my breath away. I just stood there in that harsh light of that bathroom, and I thought, holy shit, thought. Really, for the first time, it occurred to me that thoughts come and go. And that if I'm not feeling good, it just means I'm thinking something bad. It was like a whole bunch, like a Tetris game, everything went tuk, 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 tuk. And then, of course, that was just the beginning of then and what does that mean? And what are the implications? And lots of arguing with that. I had spent many years fine-tuning this image, I'll have you know, Pilos. And I was determined to hold on to that image many times, despite the fact that it was not, it was not bringing me joy in many ways.
And I'm curious, because to have that sort of road to Damascus type sort of revelation, and then to step into the role as CEO of Danone USA, which is a crazy job. How were you from that moment? Can you look back and can you sort of trace how that dawning changed you as the leader?
So interesting that you say this, Billis, because I look back now and I see that my wisdom was there for a lot longer than I thought it was. This image of, me as a old-fashioned leader pushing people around, and then suddenly whatever you however you want to make a before and an after. I've had lots of evidence in these last 10 years of people saying to me, you were always different. So there was a wisdom emerging in me for a lot longer than I was aware of. And I think that that's also, it's interesting stuff. This is actually a useful comment, sort of conversation around, we have no idea of our impact. A few months back, LinkedIn said, you were mentioned in a post. I went on that post, and it was a story by a young man in Canada, in fact, who said he was, now a successful, 40-year-old, and he was musing on the fact that he was apparently in a meeting when he was brand new, and the leader of that meeting asked his opinion, and it was the first time anybody had asked his opinion, and it changed everything for him. And of course, that was apparently me. Now, I don't remember the man, and I don't remember the meeting. Obviously, when I looked it down, I could reconstruct it. But I was apparently doing things that were impactful to people much at a time when I was judging myself a lot.
Mm.
And so there are a couple of things. The first thing is you never know the impact that you're going to have. And it could be that when you take your last breath, the single most useful thing that you ever did was some random, throwaway thing that you don't even remember. So don't even spend your time thinking about whether you're having an impact in the world. Just live your best life and let the rest take care of itself. But the second thing is that my own opinion of myself is really not interesting, because over the years, I have thought very highly of myself when I was doing a lot of shitty stuff. And I have thought very critically of myself when I was doing very beautiful stuff, and everything in between. So the whole question, and in fact, I find this very interesting with my clients, I'm learning more and more to not be interested in their opinions about themselves, because that's just a sort of post hoc made up thing. What's interesting is like moment by moment by moment by moment. So coming back to your point, I think I started to be more conscious of a whole bunch of things that I hadn't before. But I also think that it wasn't as dramatic a shift as sometimes these kinds of, redemption moments make us think.
No, I'm so glad you expressed it that way, because we've had a number of guests on, and a few recently, who have sort of pointed to this idea that when we're not engaged in the innocent misuse of our thinking, and we're just being, we're naturally expressing from that place of wisdom. And so, in that meeting with that gentleman from Canada, you were probably just doing what your wisdom naturally facilitated, which was just like leaning in and, hey, what's your opinion? And you were expressing. And then when we slip out of that mode into the seeking mode, and we engage in this constant dialogue with the thinking and the thoughts and the sort of almost mindless kind of pursuit of what the truth is. We forget how to express who we actually are, and the fact that you had been expressing who you are, this beautiful human being, full of wisdom and love, genuinely curious about other humans, wanting to lead, wanting to do good in the world, that came through. But we oscillate as human beings. We oscillate between this expressing and the seeking. And so it's I love the way you expressed it, because I always love asking that question, because I think what actually happens is it shines a light on what it's like to be able to express freely and unashamedly, and abandon the seeking, as fearful as that may be.
Well, yeah, and how even in our most troubled times, we can't overthink all the time. And in the unguarded, unseeking moments is when our innocence just leads us, constantly. And the sort of noticing that it's exactly the inverse of how we think it is that it's the dropping away of, the trying that brings us home. That it's just settle that, and even that sounds like it's too much work. It's not to be, you don't have to do anything. It just does you, like I have a friend, and I was walking in the park with her, and she was talking about an ex-boyfriend, and she was saying her narrative, and of course now I listen to the narrative. Well, I should never have broken up with him. I broke up with him. It was a mistake. I was going through a bad phase, and now I want him back, and I do nothing but think about him all the time. I think about him all the time. I think about him all the time, and it's horrible. And my life is terrible. And so I said, I kind of got curious. Think about him all the time. What do you mean by that? Like, all the time. He never leaves my mind, she said. So I said, so in the last hour since we've been walking, how many times has he crossed your mind? Of course, we then went back through this hour, the last hour, what she did at breakfast time. I mean, even if you try your hardest to suffer about the boyfriend that you should not have broken up with, you would be hard pressed to think about it for 5 minutes an hour. You really would be. I mean, even if you try really hard, that's 20 minutes an hour. That still leaves another 40 minutes when you're doing other stuff, And it was so interesting because I understand how it works, because every thought that she had about him went da 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 da, and every thought she had about I'm hungry and my feet hurt, and I wonder if I should have a bath, or I need to go to the bathroom, or I wonder if my bank balance is full enough, or all of those things. But the thoughts about the boyfriend did this. It just, once we really see that, then we see, oh, when I'm not scaring the shit out of myself, when I'm not trying, when I'm not seeking, oh, that's who I am. That's her. Oh, that's cool. Oh, that's fun. There's a whole wonder and curiosity thing.
Given that, and let's say 12 years ago, do you look back on the time before, it's kind of like before 12 years ago and after? Do you think that you were essentially living like exactly how you were meant to? It's just that it seemed like it looked like a really good idea to spend a lot of time trying to manage your thinking. Is that the kind of fundamental difference? Do you know what I mean? And the reason I ask is because sometimes I think it can sound like, oh, once we start to see this, then we're going to live like our best lives. And somehow we were not living our best life before. And I'm curious if you look back and go, oh, I was living my best life. I just was very enamored with the idea that sometimes I wasn't.
I really love this question, because I think, oh my gosh, it's like, when people kind of either do it shouldn't have been, and I wasted all this time, and now I've got it right, and blah, blah, or they do, it couldn't have been any different. It was my destiny to, look, it was what it was. It was, and I think, and I did a whole lot of really cool stuff during that time. I mean, as I speak to you now, I'm sitting in an apartment in New York City. I didn't buy this apartment because I was like meditating on a mountaintop. I bought this apartment because I was working my ass off trying to conquer the world, trying to be happy. So you could call it ill-gotten gains. They bought me an apartment in New York. Okay, well, fine. But I think there's another thing that I'm seeing now. I don't think about it much, Alan, except that it gave me skills that I find very helpful today. So I'll give you an example. We were talking about the young man in the meeting who said nice things. I can tell you that there are a bunch of people that I've worked with over the years who would, if they could, they probably wouldn't bother, but they could post on LinkedIn and say, I had an interaction with her and she was a bitch. She was tough on me. She was unfair. She was unreasonable. She was mean because I was also that. And when I was suffering and struggling, I, like many people, would play a game of what I call spin the bottle now, which is I feel terrible, so it's either your fault or it's my fault. I mean, these days I see it genuinely as random and as innocent to spin the bottle. Because sometimes, of course, I still do it now. I'll say to my boyfriend, "It's," and then I go, "Ooh, I'm playing that game," But in the old days, it did look to me at times like you were the problem. And I had a streak in me, and Billows, you and I are both South Africans. South Africans, we learned a little edge when we were youngsters. And I was a bully many times. If I was not getting my way, I would push and shove. Now, bullying is, people talk a lot about being bullied. Very few people talk about being a bully. I know what it's like to be a bully. I understand the pain that leads you to bully people. I get it. I'm just pulling out one little thing from my history that sometimes is really helpful in coaching. I mean, I even at some level, understand some of the people that we all hate in powerful positions. I understand this desire to punish other people to make yourself feel better. Now, I know there are a lot of people who don't understand that because that's not where they go when they're off. That's where I used to go when I was off. So I think that our histories, whatever they were, they couldn't have been any different for all sorts of reasons. But the upside is we have this like little kit bag of compassion for other people's specific idiosyncrasies. That's how it looks to me.
Yeah. Just to keep digging into that, when you look back now, and if you could have gifted this insight that you had 12 years ago to yourself at any point in your life, would you go back and gift it to yourself? And what impact do you think that would have had? So the first part is, would you? And then the second part is, and if you did, what do you think that the possibility that might have existed in it?
I don't think I would, Alan. I loved all of it. Even when I didn't. It's but a different question is, do I want to gift it to kids, other people's kids, people or kids? Yes.
And it's funny, isn't it? Because I think little kids really do know this, except they don't even think that they don't. It's not even a question for them, isn't it? It's like, I've got 2 teenage boys, and I'm like, I would love for them to really know this. And like, but the reason I asked, and this has been a personal realization for me very recently, like in the last couple of weeks, is that somehow I think the fact that you don't have to waste our time trying to manage our thinking, like that the design is so good, and that, seeking happiness or peace somewhere outside of ourselves is, a fool's errand because it's just not on offer. I think somewhere in my subconscious, without me realizing it, I had interpreted that then, like, well, then I'm never going to do the stuff that I used to do before I started to get really curious about this. I'm not going to do that again because that was all, they were all symptoms of my chasing. And I've realized that no, they were not all symptoms of my chasing. Like, lots of the time I was just having a great time whilst thinking that there was still something for me to find. And so I was doing a lot of searching. And recently, and I had a great chat with Billows earlier this week, because I got the kind of new opportunity, which is getting back into, like, I guess, working in a company. And that's what dawned on me, that for 7 years, I've had, like, somewhere inside me, everything that I did before was a symptom of searching. And now I'm like, no, that's not true. Like everything I did before was a symptom of living, which is kind of cool. Like it was just living a life. But I was doing that in spite of my misunderstanding versus because of my misunderstanding. And that's what I wanted to kind of draw out. I was just super curious to hear that, because some people might misinterpret. They go, "Oh, right, so Lorna would, like, all of her success was down to her misunderstanding." I'm like, no, no, no. Lorna was just super successful and like did amazing things. And you know, there was like some crossed wires in there about how she worked, and so that's what I wanted to put onto the table.
I love this discernment, Alan, because what I found happening for me at the beginning is I went through, in order to be a CEO of a big company like I was for 20 years, I had like a bearing. You didn't fuck with me. I walked in the room, you knew I was the boss. Now, where do you get that? I don't know. You absorb it over time. Every job you get, it takes you 6 months to kind of get the thing, to get that the right feeling. And then you get another job and you get like that. So then you have that. I had that. I didn't realize I had that, but I would walk into a room and people would know that I was there. Then I started to see this understanding. I was like, oh, hold on a second. So I was kind of a bit adrift. I was like I was like wearing a suit metaphorically. So then I went through a phase of pushing it all away. Like people would ask me what I did or what I do or whatever, and I was like, I don't want to talk about it, because I couldn't find a way to integrate that stuff that I got up to while I was having lots of misunderstandings and what I wanted to do now. But it's interesting that you say it's 7 years, because I reckon it took me 5 years or so of pushing it away before I could kind of come around it another way and absorb all the beautiful stuff of it, and the stuff I really do want to do. Like last night, it's interesting, last night somebody spoke to me about a new opportunity and I listened to them and I was like genuinely listening for the first time. Oh, and then I was like, no, I'm not interested in that. But I could have gone, which was sort of skills from the old days. And so I think it takes us a little while to integrate. And I think now if I walked into a room and I said, I used to be the CEO of Danone, people go, oh, no, you couldn't have been, because I don't have that bearing anymore. And unless I really need it, in which case I can put it on, So I think it's like, it really does become like a grab bag of stuff that you then exactly. I reckon 7 years is a great sort of time. Now you can settle back and say, oh, that bit from my past, skill, preference, I got it. That bit from my past, nah. New thing, maybe, I just think we come at it from a more balanced place.
I'm so glad, by the way, that we've recently started to do these podcasts on video, and I'm so glad, because you've got such a way of expressing yourself through non-verbal communication as well. It's just kind of
not poker.
cool. I love the way you went, but I can put that on when I need to. And I thought, oh yeah, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
I got delightfully nervous.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the I just want to make this point that I really love this. There's it's a huge point here, that our wisdom is just there all the time. And we may have a whole lot of shit piled on top of it, and it might be really difficult to see at times, but it's always there. There is nowhere to go. It's all okay. And that's been much more recent for me to see. Like, whoa, all of the wisdom, all the time.
One thread I'd love to pull on a little bit is, the work you do in philanthropy and impact investing and social responsibility. And I know you're very passionate about B Corps, and your TED Talk is freaking awesome. But I guess the question is, where did that come from? Where did all of that start? what was it born out of? What drew you to some of the? And I mean, I don't think you sit on a board of Rhino Protection, but in the TED talk, you laid down the gauntlet on stage, and you said, I'm declaring my collaborative intentions here to do something about poaching. So I'd love to just kind of dig into that a little bit. Where does that all come from?
So it's kind of it kind of threads back to this earlier conversation of trying to blend an old life and a new life, or blending in new things that we learn. So I didn't care about anything environmental or social for much of my career, and then I went to live in China for 6 years, and I was living in Shanghai and from 2006 through 2012, and this was the time of China's huge emergence and the sort of industrialization and the sort of wealth creation of China. I think 400 million people were raised out of poverty in that time, and in front of my eyes, I saw the implications of 1 billion people wanting what Americans had had for decades: the cars, the animals, the whole thing, and I saw where this was going for the first time. It was like, whoa. And so that was the beginning of the real sort of awakening around from a corporate point of view. I moved to the US from China, and I thought China was kind of a bit of a shock to my system. The US was a much bigger shock. Of all of the countries I've lived, of all the experiences I've had, the US has been the most challenging by far. Because of the sort of individualism of the US system, that I have to take care of myself and I have to protect myself and my family. And there are all sorts of structural reasons and historical reasons why that is the way that it is. But I came here to the US, was here for a couple of years, and I realized I just couldn't do this normal corporate stuff anymore. And so I got very interested in philanthropy, and I decided I was going to move to the not-for-profit sector. And then I looked at how the not-for-profit sector worked, and I realized, oh my God, you take all this money from rich people who made their money like treating people and the planet not very well, and then you give it to other countries. Like the job that I was looking at, I would have spent half my time in Silicon Valley getting money from people, and then the other half of my time in Africa giving it away. And I thought, that doesn't make sense. How do I find a new way? And that's when B Corp, had emerged as a new way of corporates to basically do it all. Conscious, aware, kind capitalism. Business is a force for good. And so I went back to Danone and helped that organization on that journey, because I thought that my history was all in capitalism. And the good thing about capitalism, or the good thing about working in business, and I've spent a lot of time in not-for-profits much more recently, corporates are really good at getting things done. They're efficient. They're focused on whatever their goals are. The problem is most of them are focused on the wrong goals. So if you can broaden the basket of goals that all corporates are focused on, I thought you could really, you could change the world. So I spent most of my time in that world. And I think it's true. It's fair to say that in many parts of the world, this has become obvious. For example, carbon reporting is now going to be a standard in the European Union. The idea that organizations take responsibility for their treatment of the people and the planet that they use in order to create profit is obvious in many parts of the world. And unfortunately, in the US, it's exactly the opposite now. The US is going in the other direction. Having said that, there are lots of people in the US who are doing really great stuff, particularly private companies who are, that's why I'm really interested in impact investing. Because if you can get together as a group of committed capitalists who want to use their money as a force for good, there is a lot of really great stuff happening. And so that's why I spend my time. For example, Radical Impact is a really good example of that. That's where I choose to invest my money. So, my journey's been sort of, I kind of have glossed over some of the heartbreak of this. The way the US has shifted away from that when I thought that they would shift toward it has really hurt me personally. But in many states, there's a lot of good stuff going on. So, people say to me all the time, I feel like this is a whole other basket to open up. I think our path through in the US is at a state level, because you can still do really good stuff in states like Vermont, like New York, like Connecticut, like California, and you can impact a lot of federal actions that way. But the general ethos in the US in capitalism is deeply concerning to me.
Yeah, I think this concept of conscious capitalism is very appealing to a lot of people, particularly when they see it, because I think we spend a lot of time apologizing for capitalism. But to your point, capitalism is actually phenomenal. I mean, it's raised more people out of poverty than anything else. And to your point, it's a force for action, and pointed in the right direction. It can be very positive action. And this concept of the conscious capitalism that has been around for a while, but I think is kind of catching on, particularly in the face of some rather scary dynamics, particularly in the US, I think is very encouraging. But where I was kind of going with this a little bit was this awareness, this this sense of being connected to something much bigger in terms of the planet, where we're going. And you, by your own admission, you flew all over the world and you didn't really care about any of that stuff, and then suddenly your eyes were sort of open to what you were part of. And I love the way you described it in your TED talk. This notion of a river, and understanding your place in the river and what's upstream and what's downstream, and the intended and unintended consequences of your actions. And I'm just curious about your 12 years ago moment, how you seem to have fallen into, and I don't know if it's deliberate or you just followed the tickles of your soul, or it's come at you, but you've fallen into these amazing organizations, and you're pursuing those unashamedly. Is that all part of your expressing and turning off the seeking?
I don't know. Honestly, Billows, every day I know less than I knew the day before. And I kind of like that, And it's interesting, I haven't been on a podcast for a while. And I was realizing this morning that I was a little bit nervous, because I don't even know how to speak about how I live now. I make up stories to make other people think I'm not crazy. But when I actually, if I'm honest with myself about why I do stuff, I don't have good reasons. They just seem like a good idea. And so there are certain things that seem completely obvious to me now. So I use the river metaphor in the TED talk. I didn't say what I really wanted to say, which is that if you know that your children are downstream drinking from the river, you would not piss in it. That is the truth. And if people really understood that that is what they are really doing, then what they would do about that would be obvious. I don't have to tell people your kids are drinking from that river. Therefore, well, of course, what would you do? You would make sure it's beautiful for them. And so this sense of who are my children? I actually happen to not have children, but who are my children? Well, everybody, you, everybody listening, even Trump, he is. So how do I expand my consciousness into such a way that my actions genuinely get that connection? And at the same time, I'm not sitting on a mountain top, meditating. I'm also, buying things. I'm deciding whether to put the air conditioner on or not. I'm deciding, I have a dog, every time I pick up his poop and put it in a bag and put it in the bin, I think, what am I doing to landfill? I'm a normal human with a body and a life, and I'm making decisions every day. And I'm trying to I'm not trying. I seem to be expanding and contracting around my consciousness of like my connection to everything that is. And, even in this conversation, I find myself being, moved by just the simple fact that the three of us are talking in this amazing way. We're all like, we're in love with each other. You even know you met. And, should I put my money in Chase or not, or whatever the decision? I would never put my money in Chase, just FYI. But so the whole question of how we act is a direct result of our level of consciousness. Direct result. And so spending my time, for example, on the advisory board of Radical Impact, one of the most exciting things when I see their report, the annual report just came out yesterday. So exciting to see these young people doing amazing things and getting funded by people like us who have a longer, more patient relationship with capital, who want to see KPIs that are not just financial, who want to understand what's happening to the human beings and what's happening to the planet of all of the companies that we're investing in. There's beautiful stuff going on, much of it underneath the stock exchange, because the stock exchange is very difficult to run a listed company these days and trying to be doing good stuff in the world because that money is not patient. It's like, if I look at my calendar and look at the way I'm spending my time, it's this little dance. It's like at one level realizing that, tiny, tiny little things matter as much as big things. And that whole question of what's little and big is just made up. But it's also some sort of honest use of my skills in areas that can be helpful. So there are some things that I can make contributions on. I'm the chair of the advisory board of Seventh Generation, which is owned by Unilever. Unilever's in a really difficult position. It's a really tricky. They're listed in two countries that are not the US. Nelson Peltz is one of their big investors and a board member. It's hard for them to work out what to do with Seventh Generation, which is a tiny little business, in the face of Procter & Gamble in the US. Now, as I said, all those things, a bunch of people listening to this, I don't know what she's talking about, but I know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. And so that's a conversation that I want to be part of, helping the navigation of that. So, yeah, I think it's sort of less grand than I think people make these things seem. Like they do kind of come along. I say yes, I say no. I lean in, I lean out. I don't know, And I'll change next year, if you ask me, I'll probably have a different answer.
I don't know if I've got it exactly right, but when you said, I make up stories so people don't think I'm crazy. I love the line. Can you just explain what you mean by that? I think I know, but I would love to hear it from you.
So if you take not flying, I'm not flying this year. I made the decision to not fly. Why? If I'm talking to, hardcore environmentalists, I can say, and there's websites where you go on and you declare your, refusal to fly because of your carbon footprint. Well, I can look like a hero, shine the old halo. That's one story. Second story is, at my feet, I have a magnificent and very senior dog. And anybody who's had a senior dog knows that you want to be with them, and it's difficult to have other people look after them. And I don't want to not be with him. And so that's a story. I can talk to a dog owner and we can have that conversation. I will always cry at that conversation. Third story is traveling is hard. I'm a green card holder. I've left the country, come back into the country. Maybe they won't let me back in. I don't know. There's that story. I could give that story if I was trying to be, self-righteous and indignant. There's a story about how much I love the small things in my life right now, and I want to experiment. I can make up thousands of stories. The truth is, I have no clue. I just don't want to fly.
Yeah.
Mm.
I love that because, and I don't think, Bill, I don't think this was your intention with your question, but it's kind of what it stirred up for me through your question and then Lorna's answer. Are we expressing or seeking? And it's like, I don't know sometimes, because the invitation, even in that, is to create a story behind, oh, I'm doing this because it's expression, but I'm not doing that because I think that was seeking. But when Lorna said that, I was like, oh yeah. Like one of the things that is such a great possibility to give up on is the idea that we need to have a reason. And like, well, it feels good. And so I'm going to go with that. And I think you're right. Most people go, well, that's not enough. Like, you are crazy. You 3 kids, you're crazy. You have to have a reason. And it's like, or maybe we don't. But maybe the more important thing is, how does it feel?
Yes, and I tell you, by the way, Liz Gilbert, I love Liz Gilbert. She says, the question why is a spiritual black hole, and I'm coming to see that that's true. I'm less and less interested in that question. But what I'm noticing is that the content of your conversation needs to change. Because if you actually look at what most of us spend our time thinking about and talking about with each other, it's this kind of stuff. Well, why are you not flying? And actually, it's just sort of candle dipping the relationship. It's like we're playing to build connection. So what I'm noticing is that the content with which I build connection has become really small. It's wonderful to talk about whether the coffee is as good today as it was yesterday, or whether the small stuff, the weather, all the things that people talk about to build connection. And there's an altitude of conversation that I notice I just drop out of now. I'm interested in the small stuff, the beautiful stuff about like, how far did you run today, Billas? And did your wife run faster than you? And, when you said you were in pain, was that good pain, not good pain? We could talk for ages about that because that's a small, beautiful thing that you did today that's about your humanity. And then we can talk about the theater, music. Like I'm going to I'm a huge country music fan, which is not what you would have expected. And I'm going to see Vince Gill tonight. If anybody listening and they know Vince Gill, this is very exciting to me. And I've been listening to him on repeat and I've downloaded his set list and I'm so excited about every single song. I want to talk about that. The question of the political questions these days, almost always not interesting to me anymore. This whole seeking question, I don't know. It's an altitude that often I just don't like. There's nothing there because I love you. You love me. We're all here. We're all just walking each other home. End of conversation.
But you said something which I love because I feel the same way, and I've noticed it more and more in my day to day. Is here you are, a veteran CEO who, by her own admission, had a pretty formidable bearing. Probably had a deep concept that you had to have a lot of the answers, and here you are saying, every day I wake up and I know less and less, and I fucking love that. And you know, and like, just, I very rarely say this, but like, I've got a PhD from Cambridge, and I can see people are like, oh, fuck, you must know a lot of stuff. And I'm like, I actually know nothing. And the older I get, the less I know, and the more comfortable I am knowing absolutely squat. And then it goes to your thing about, oh, well, you know, I joined the board of Radical Impact, or, you know, I'm really interested in the rhinos. I'm doing this phenomenal work because I met these phenomenal human beings and we're collaborating on this thing. And why are you doing it? I don't know. I really don't know. I don't care. I'm sick and tired of those questions. I don't care. I'm just doing it because it feels fantastic and I love being with these people. Like, that is it. For me, anyway. And then so when you said that, it just resonated so beautifully, because I'm like, thank God. It's like people like you, just, it's like a shining beacon. It's like it's like, hey, everybody, like, just the the narratives, drop the narratives, stop making up the stories. It's okay not to have any answers. Just go and express and see what happens.
Do you know Sulika Duard? She's married to John Baptiste. She's an amazing human being, and she's just written a new book. And I heard her being interviewed the other day, and she's had a long journey with leukemia. She's a young woman, and this sort of journey has defined much of the last 10 or 15 years of her life. And she said, the worst advice that anybody has ever given me is live every day as if it's your last. I mean, what the hell is that? Like, how do you do that? What are you going to do? Empty your bank account and like tell people you love them? And then what are you going to do tomorrow? You know, she said, I live every day as if it's my first, with the sense of wonder, the sense of curiosity, the sense of not knowingness. And I tell you, it just like completely blew my mind when I read that, when I saw that. Because to your point, Billas, living every day as if it's your first, all those ideas of you know, like that guy Sadhguru, that hilarious fellow. Sadhguru says, just for today, forget all your conclusions. Who would you be without your conclusions? And I love this word conclusions, because conclusions is like, yep, worked it out, and I have concluded it. I have a decision, and it's final. No, live each day as if it's your first. Like, holy shit, this is an amazing world. Wonder what I'm going to do. And, you know, there we are.
Whoa. What an amazing place to kind of guide us towards bringing this beautiful conversation to a close. So we have a closing tradition, which is to invite our guests, if they could create their bumper sticker for life, what would it say and why?
Well, the first thing is that I would make it so that the adhesive was easily removable and replaceable. Because one thing that I have learned is that every time I say something for life, I change my mind. So the idea that it's permanent, it's one of the reasons I would never have a tattoo, is I can't imagine the permanence. But the one that I would have today that would have a gentle adhesive would be, you know, I'd love to say something really profound, but honestly, the one that just keeps coming up is be kind. Be kind. Kindness, greatly underrated.
It's funny. I think in 2 years, over 2 years of doing this, I don't think that's ever been a bumper sticker.
Well, you know,
I love that one.
That's one that, in fact, I think I could have with a permanent adhesive, because you could add to that, but I don't think that one's ever going out of fashion.
Mm. Mm. The world needs more kindness, for sure. You don't need seventh generation to wash that off. See the plug there? Hey,
Thank you very much.
go out and buy 7th generation.
Please do.
Eco-friendly.
Excellent product.
Well, Lorna, this has been very cool. I think, you know, I don't know what I expected, but this was like, it was like 100x. It's just been awesome. Like, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us, because it has felt like that. It's felt like three of us hanging out, having a really cool conversation that's gone in some wonderful directions. And, yeah, I feel very grateful. So thank you for that.
Me too. Thank you.
Yeah, sending lots of love and gratitude, and can't wait to chat to you again, either online or off. And I'm sure we will be collaborating on all sorts of weird and wonderful things anyway.
I'm sure. You never know. Well, I'm not sure. I don't know. Let's see. All right. Thanks, guys.
Well, folks, no, you're well. Thank you, folks. That is us coming to an end of another amazing conversation with a beautiful guest. You know, we hope, as always, that you've heard something in this conversation that's sparked an interesting place for you to look. I think for me, I will end with that those words, Lorna, that you told from that story. If we could all go forth from here and live every day as if it's our first. What a beautiful opportunity that is. And so until we are with you next week, as always, go forth and live into your brilliance.